welcome them in the chat. So welcome everyone to our September 8th general meeting of the Whitaker Community Council. My name's Ian, I'm the chair, and I wanted to just share a couple of different ways that you can voice your interest in participation tonight. The first is by raising your physical hand. So that's going to be a signal to me, just like Gail's doing right now. Welcome, Amanda, that you have an interest in participating, and that'll be a way signaling to me that you'd like to participate. The second way that you can voice your interest in participation is by speaking your name or by raising your hand. So Gail's just done so. She's put her hand up, as has Stephen. And that's another way to voice your interest in participation and add your name to the queue. Another way still is by just saying your name if you're using a telephone tonight. And if you are calling in on a telephone, I'm going to mute you immediately, or unmute you rather immediately, so you don't have to ask to unmute. And then the last way is in the Zoom chat. So in the Zoom chat, let's just say Amanda raises her hand. I would put Amanda is in the queue. And then I would put what the speaking order is. So in the speaking order, Amanda in this hypothetical was a little bit slower on the draw. So it would be hypothetically Jane first and then Amanda second. And that's the way that we're going to triage the speaking order tonight. I use he, him pronouns. And if you would be so kind to share which preferred pronouns you have, that's going to make it easier for everyone to be able to refer to you with your preferred pronouns. And with that, I'd like to pass it on to our vice chair, Gail. And we have a chair vice chair structure here, but we actually act more like co-chairs in setting the agenda, just so that y'all have a heads up. And Gail, I was wondering if you could walk through folks through some technology steps, just so people know how to be able to participate more effectively when they do choose to speak.
Thank you, Ian, and welcome everybody. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to all of you who have shown up tonight on a Wednesday evening when you might have had other things to do. Our goal here is to be clear communicators. So to that end, I will ask that everyone who is able to be aware of their own microphone, remain aware of it. Keep yourself muted except when you're speaking so that it doesn't get too garbled in the feed. For those of you who are working on a computer or a laptop, there may be a button up in the corner that says original sound off. If you push that button, then it will say original sound on. And what that does is it helps to train your computer speakers to pick up your voice more easily. It'll make it easier for us to understand you. Cell phones don't always have this option, so if you don't see it, don't worry about it. We'll still be able to hear you. You just won't be quite as clear. And obviously following Ian's instructions on how to keep the speaking order clear, this should make it possible for all of us to hear one another and understand one another and to have a good working communication. So thank you all for being here, and I'll pass it back to Ian.
Well, thanks so much, Gail. And with that, I wanted to open it up to community members. So folks who wanted to share anything during our public comment period, and this includes board members as well. So if anyone has something that they wanted to share tonight, please just raise your hand or put it in the queue that you'd like to speak. Delinia, I saw her hand shoot up first, so she's going to be first in the queue. And then after that, we will move right on to Thea. And then Jane, I saw your hand up as well. So I'm going to be typing into the queue the speaking order, but feel free to go ahead, Delinia, and then Thea, you're next, and then Jane, you're on base. Delinia?
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone on the board for your support this last couple of weeks through my family's crisis. I want you all to know that I appreciate it, and you've really helped me through it. And I feel like you guys are the best neighbors I've ever had. That's all I wanted to say.
Right back at you, Delinia. Yeah, thank you so much for being with us and just, yeah, being vulnerable and being, yeah, an amazing person. I really appreciate you. Top that, Thea. You're next on base.
I can't. So for those of you that don't know, I am kind of the Parks and Safety Liaison. And I've been talking with Chief Skinner, with our businesses, with Parks and Open Space and Public Works, because I have been getting phone calls, emails, texts, stopped on the street about the fatigue the Whitaker community is feeling with the not so polite segment of our unhoused. We have people that clean up after themselves, and then we have others that don't, and others that create problems. And so with that, I don't know if you noticed, but Washington, Jefferson, they kind of removed all the cars that were being used as trash cans, for lack of a better word, and some as drug dens. Those are being worked on. We had a couple of major drug busts. They're still working on a couple others. I need you to tell your neighbors that if they have an incident, call in, and I get that it's difficult. I have literally had a theft every single night for the last 2 weeks or day, either at my mother's property, my property, or my apartments. And it's exhausting right now, but we have to report it. So I'm going in tonight after this meeting, and I'm going to put my little driver's license in and report every stupid little thing. But they're trying to make headway, and they're basically moving them from Washington, Jefferson, and around the Whitaker right now. But I did see signs of hope today. I sat in on the city council's meeting, so I'm holding my fingers just right, my mouth, my tongue. We are getting some patrols in the parks, and if you feel uncomfortable, you have to report it, and they are aware of it. That's all I can say. So I can't really top it, Delania, but I'm feeling like there might be a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm praying for rain. Even though I'm getting my house painted, I'm praying for rain. And Park Scober Gardens. Margaret's friend JD wants to do a chess club there on Thursdays, and I spoke with the city, and the city has chessboards and chess pieces, and Margaret Mazzata said she'd be a part of that. And I also asked about getting Artie, the school bus, to come to Scoberg's Gardens, so we could bring some literature in for our young ones. So that might also be happening. So I'm working on ways to get Scoberg Gardens activated in a positive way on the days that the market's not using it. So we'll see what happens. And we're working on movie night too.
Thanks so much.
Questions?
Yeah, does anyone have any questions for Thea? I'm gonna put into the chat right now the link to the city council work session on unhoused response that happened today. There's a lot of really good news about more safe sleep sites for unhoused neighbors, so they have a place to shelter safely, with wraparound service provision from some of our service providers like St. Vincent de Paul, community supported shelters, and others.
Yeah, I think Gabe and Emerald are also in on that. And I did speak with Claire before the meeting, or I sent her a text, and she really let them know that they've kind of dumped on us and they need to keep it moving. And it sounds like the counselors are realizing that. And they're also trying, it was also brought up today, looking at policies around individuals who won't want to cooperate, who are doing the drugs and the prostitution, and how are we going to handle that? So we'll see.
Thanks, Thea. Delaney, do you have a question for Thea before we move on to Jane?
Yeah, more like it's starting to push out towards the outskirts. So they're not quite out of the Whitaker, the element. They're just moving around a little bit further down, we're seeing. I don't know if that's something that Chief Skinner should know.
Yeah, no, he's aware of that. And that's one of the things. And I'm going to schedule a drive. So I've been taking him on a drive about every 2 weeks. And I'm also working with the railroad, Union Pacific. I finally have a contact for them. We're going to see if we can get the wall cleaned up at Ninkasi, because they're actually dealing drugs there and they're lighting fires. And I'm really concerned about the fire danger, you know. So, and I spoke to Public Works about the stuff that's happening in between 2nd and Van Buren at the old parking lot. Because we have several people who live on this side of the railroad tracks in wheelchairs, and they can't get to Red Barn and Red Apple because the sidewalk's covered. So we're kind of working on that, and they know they're shoving them around. They shoved them to the river this weekend, but then they had a major bust at the river this weekend, so they kind of moved back in. And I'm also in talks with the Whitaker Night Watch, Patrol Watch person, Sergeant.
Thanks so much, Thea. Jen, did you have a question for Thea, or did you want to be added into the queue after Jane? And I'm
Thea.
sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Thea, I've been having some issues with campers in front of the house, and I had kind of a scary one this week where my neighbors weren't there to support me, and I had to deal with having them move on. So are they looking at the campers in front of residences?
You have to report them. You have to go to the parking enforcement and report them.
This one particular one, I was too nervous and afraid, actually.
It's an anonymous. You just,
No, I didn't even get to write down, look at, I didn't feel safe taking a photo, getting their license, nothing.
Okay.
They did go away, but it was very frightening.
then call EPD. When you don't feel safe, you call EPD.
They left. I don't know. It's just, I don't know.
EPD knows we're not reporting right now, but it looks like our numbers are down from last year. Our number of incidents are down from last year. And it's because we're all exhausted. We're tired of reporting because we know we don't get a response. EPD is down 15 officers.
Wow.
They're 15 short.
Well,
So,
that doesn't make me want to report, but I will.
thank you.
Here, did you have a comment following up to Thea, or did you have okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to comment after hearing what Jen just said. And, as many of you know, I had an incident where I had someone frankly frightening come to my door around 9 p.m. when I was home alone. And, in the moment, it can be kind of difficult to get your brain, straight enough to think, okay, what are my next steps? Especially, I struggle with anxiety, but I think the sort of neurotypical person would even struggle with, what do I do in this moment? So I think this is kind of just thinking out loud, but I don't know if there could be some kind of like public training or public sort of educational thing on what to do when you're in a situation where somebody is in your space, whether it's on your front porch or whether they come up to you on the street, sort of I don't know, stop, think, and react, and not just kind of let it shock you, or try not to let it shock you, because I know it's easier said than done. But when it happened to me, I certainly just sort of had a moment of shock where I kind of just balled up next to my front door after I locked it. But then, just because Thea is really great at reminding me at what to do, my brain kind of was okay, next step is to call law enforcement, because that just has to be the next step in these scenarios most of the time. So I just wanted to share that.
And then Angie, your hand's up as well. And Jane, thank you so much for your patience.
Claire,
Angie?
were you envisioning something like de-escalation training to handle the person that moment, or a printable where you go, this is the steps of things I need to do?
I didn't really have something specific in mind, and the de-escalation thing did sort of pop into my head, because I know that I think Whitaker Community Market was looking at some kind of de-escalation person at some point or another. I don't know if that ever happened. And certainly, I would never ask someone who's not formally trained to try to de-escalate the situation, but more of sort of what can I as an individual do in this moment to ensure safety for myself? Yeah, I guess that's it. And I don't know if that comes in the form of maybe Margaret with the police does, or whoever position would be most appropriate does sort of what do you do in these sort of situations? What can you do? And I don't know.
So Margaret they do that kind of training as well. And we have had de-escalation trainings about 3 or 4 years ago. They were held it was before COVID. So, but in your situation, that one wouldn't have been a de-escalation.
I apologize. Angie, you had your hand up, and then Delinea, you had your hand up as well. And then after that, we'll move on to Jane, who's been really patiently waiting to share her comment as well.
Teresa put in the box, one of the things I was going to say, Whitebird does offer de-escalation training. And then a woman that works for the city and with CORE also offered us training specifically. So I can reach back out to her. The previous board wasn't as interested, but if multiple of you are interested, then I can reach back out to the city because she had, if she still works there, actually. I don't know if Brittany still works out of that center, but that's definitely a possibility we could offer as a board.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Angie. And I've just put in Whitebird's de-escalating training, and I'll put in the Warrior Sisters self-defense training link in just a moment, and I'll pass it on to Jane. Jane, thank you so much. And yeah, just please feel free to share.
Right, whole new topic. I'm so excited about the wellness clinic at Olivium Sunday. All of the advertising about it stressed the vaccines, which is so important, but I didn't find out that there were also going to be COVID tests until somebody commented on it. And I'm just wondering if some of the advertising could also mention that too, because other people might be as interested in that as I was.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you bringing that up, and that was one of the things that I was going to share. And then after me, I'll pass it to Delinia. So we are going to have COVID testing from HIV Alliance, and we're actually having a new vaccine partner this Sunday, which is Whitebird. So we've traditionally partnered with Lane County Public Health. Unfortunately, with the Delta surge, we've had to pivot really quickly. And yeah, just wanted to praise our program coordinator, Doriandra, who's been a steady hand leading us through our wellness clinics. With the Delta surge, we've had to scale down the number of services we've provided, but we're looking forward to October scaling back up, partnering with HIV Alliance to do STI testing, partnering with Eugene Bleeds to provide free menstruation supplies to the community, as well as adding other nonprofit service providers to really make this about holistic wellness. We know that COVID-19 vaccines are super important, as well as COVID testing, super critical and hard to get, right? You know, it's not always easy to find. And even if you do find it, it sometimes takes, gosh, you know, I still haven't gotten one of my COVID tests back, and I took it, you know, Monday last week. So yeah, we are going to have it, and I'll pass that on. You know, Doriandra's here. So she, you know, she's definitely hearing that, but yeah, we definitely want to make sure that members of the community can access testing easily and get, you know, information back quickly too. Delinia, did you want to share a comment as well?
Yeah, also, since we have the gift cards, I wanted to see how people would feel about using them as a bribe and like really shining a light on like, hey, we've got gift cards if you come on down.
Yeah, I know that I've got some thoughts on that, and I'd love to hear what other folks think. But hearing from other members of the public and other board members first, how do you feel about gift card incentives for getting vaccinated? We've got some wiggly fingers from folks, thumbs up. We've got a raise the roof from Angie, no surprise there. But yeah, I just want folks to know that, like, initially as a board, we felt that it wasn't good to have the vaccine incentives be the difference between people being able to eat and not to eat. But we're kind of in a situation now where I feel that, yeah, things are really dire, and it's the difference between someone being able to access life-saving medical care and someone not being able to access life-saving medical care in a hospital where the National Guard currently are. So that's how I feel now. We're going to be offering $100 Safeway gift cards that we received from Oregon Health Authority at no cost to the Whitaker Community Council, and the board approved $5,000 in incentives for exclusively Whitaker businesses during the last board meeting. So yeah, we're working hard and making sure that the funding that we do receive stays here in the Whitaker, and that also we leverage any incentives that we don't have to pay for. And then Stephen, I saw that your hand's up as well.
Just a question: if I copy and paste information from a clinic into a post, is everything accurate in the post? In the past, I have posted things from WCC posts, and it's turned out that things changed and they weren't accurate.
Yeah, that's a great question, Stephen, and I can share what I know is that we've had to pivot kind of quickly based on the Delta surge, but I think that what we're seeing is cases stabilize, right? We've hit a peak and we're going back down. We're not going down quickly enough, but we're going down. And so we initially weren't able to do the same set of services, right? We still had COVID testing, we still had COVID vaccines, but we didn't have the whole set of wellness services. So I think come October, we'll be able to offer the same set of services, and we've changed the information to reflect what we're currently able to provide, given the new Delta protocols that we've heard from Wayne County Public Health.
I'm planning to do another of my bulletins on the Whitaker page with this week's numbers, and the numbers of new cases almost down to what they were at the beginning of August, which was the beginning of the Delta surge. And once again, almost 500 people in our zip code got vaccinated last week. So it's just kind of hitting it out of the park now that we know what we need to do when these things happen. I think for previous surges, the community was still kind of groping, trying to figure out where are the controls on this thing. I think we have a much better handle on that now. So when we need to, we can hit the controls pretty fast. So it's amazing to watch the community responding like it responds.
Yeah, thanks for that, Stephen. And then the last thing I wanted to share before I introduced our first speaker is I had the opportunity to go to Pastor Gabe's open house last Friday for a 4-acre site called Everyone Village that took into consideration the model that Amanda is going to share with us tonight that was really spearheaded by Square One Villages and is a national model that exists right here in our community at Emerald Village. Pastor Gabe has a vision of what this 4-acre site in West Eugene that they're receiving tax-free. I think they're paying $1 a year for the lease from Rexius, which is a construction company, I think, getting some nods. So yeah, it's a site with a lot of potential and a lot of work to do, frankly. It's 4 acres. There's a parking lot on the site that they're going to use for RVs, and then they're going to develop the western portion of the property that's going to have permanent housing infrastructure, much in the same way described to me as what exists in the villages that have been done from Square One. So Teresa, I just wanted to share with you that there were both community advocates there, but also unhoused members of our own community. Okra was there and shared his vision for the type of community that he would like to live in, and it was a super empowering experience, right? Because he's like, hey man, this sounds great. Hey, I'm an unhoused person who's lived in community for 35 years. Let me share with you what has worked and hasn't worked. So yeah, anyone who knows Okra, yeah, he just had a lot to share, and it was super exciting to see that it was a space that was inclusive, not only for advocates and allies, but also unhoused community members to be able to lead and kind of co-envision a place for them. So if anyone wants to get more involved with that project, I can share with you the contact information for Pastor Gabe that was actually shared with me through Thea. So Thea might be a better contact to be able to reach out to. But yeah, you can either reach out to Thea or I, and I'd be happy to share the vision that Pastor Gabe had, and just know that the project is still in its formation phase, but the city was there for the open house too, and they're excited about the possibilities of that site as another safe sleep site. And just so everybody knows, the safe sleep sites that the city's standing up will have first right of approval to the folks living at Washington, Jefferson, and 13th and Chambers. So the folks that are currently living here in the Whitaker and sheltering in the park will have an opportunity to be able to move to the safe sleep sites if they choose to. And the 2 safe sleep sites that are in the Whitaker, proposed safe sleep sites, I've heard that the property owners haven't said yes, but they also haven't said no. So Delinia, you've got your hand up. No hand up. I don't even know how to do that no crossy thing. That was cool.
Know how to get those off. Sorry.
Oh, okay. And with that, I wanted to move on from public comment and welcome our first speaker in our series on the housing crisis in Eugene, but specifically in the Whitaker. As an organization that received some of the first community development block grant funding in 1974 that the Ford administration put out, we have a long history of supporting cooperative housing, and we're really lucky tonight to have Amanda Dellinger, a leader in cooperative housing in its own right. And like I said, an organization, Square One Villages, that has a national model that's been replicated not just in Eugene, Springfield, but around the country. She's their community relations director, and I'll let Amanda talk about her own history. And again, we were instrumental in fostering the East Blair Housing Co-op in the early 70s through a series of grants. And we as a board and as a community certainly have a history of supporting cooperative housing and alternative housing developments. And we certainly feel the need to do that now more than ever. So Amanda, I know that there's a lot of excitement to hear from you tonight. We wanted to welcome you, as someone who's said hi to folks at Emerald Village. I had never known about the village model before I came to Eugene. And, just, the Whitaker being the Whitaker, seeing Emerald Village here and seeing, I think one of the houses is actually up for rent right now. So it's a place where community members can come in and join the Whitaker. So it's a special place. And again, really excited to hear from you tonight.
Yes.
Have a conversation too.
Great. Thank you so much, Ian. And thank you for having me, everyone. It's really good to be here. I wish I could be with you all in person. I really do. I'm hoping that my internet connection is going to work well enough for me to be on screen with you. If it doesn't, I'll probably just turn my screen off. Ian, is there a way for me? I have a little presentation. Is there a way for me to share my screen?
Yes, there is. If you just spin 3 times and then say Eugene backwards, it should work.
Okay. All right. Great.
Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay, great. Perfect. Okay, so let's play this from the start. Okay, so many of you are probably most familiar with Square One Villages through Emerald Village, I imagine. And you may or may not know that our organization was founded after the, back in 2011, after the eviction of the Occupy camp in Eugene. And really that was our Opportunity Village was our original vision, that we were going to have a transitional tiny house village for people navigating homelessness. And then very soon after we welcomed the new residents in Opportunity Village, we realized, wow, what good is transitional housing if there's literally nowhere for people to go next? And so then very quickly after we started imagining Emerald Village and what that would look like, how it could be financially self-sustaining, which it is. 22 homes in Emerald Village, and the way that we're able to do it, to develop it as a financially self-sustaining model, is to build it as a housing cooperative and land trust combined. And so that's really the basis of the village model. Square One owns the land, and then residents own a share in the cooperative. And actually Emerald Village and Cottage Village, our second village down in Cottage Grove, are both technically leasehold co-ops. So the cooperative doesn't technically own the homes. Square One owns the homes. And so what we're developing now with the village model is actually a way for the cooperative themselves to own the homes and improvements on the land. And then Square One Villages simply owns the land underneath. And we also provide training to the residents on how do you manage a housing cooperative. Most people don't know how to do that, let alone people coming from vulnerable situations. The slide I'm going to show you next is a little bit intense. You don't really know what you're looking at, but we're going to break it down a little bit. So the village model, like I said, it's co-op housing with land trust being the ownership of the land. And so let me start just by kind of explaining. So one of the great things about a land trust is that we can assure perpetual affordability. So a lot or all of affordable housing that receives tax credits, there is a 20 to 30 year sunset clause, essentially. So after 20 to 30 years is over, that affordable housing becomes market rate, which means all of the families in those homes lose their housing or have to come up with this additional money. So the land trust assures that generations to come will be able to, that this will be affordable to them. Because a housing cooperative, there's a lot of housing cooperatives, especially out in New York, that are market rate. And what's great is the co-op, the residents themselves are essentially their own landlord. And so a housing co-op without a community land trust could decide to turn it into market rate housing. But we have this additional support and assurance that that won't happen. But a housing cooperative offers very affordable monthly rents. The people at Emerald Village pay the lowest rents that we've been able to find in the state, between $250 to $350 per month. And actually at Emerald Village, for the first 10 months, $50 of that goes to essentially a savings account for them. That's how they gain their equity, since they're a leasehold co-op, not a limited equity co-op. And so then by the end of those 10 months, they'll have if they still live there, they'll have $1,500 that they can take with them to put down on their next housing opportunity. Or if they are staying there after that, because it's permanent housing, people don't ever have to move out, then they essentially have that in a savings account. And so the village also operates at cost. So those minimal monthly rents are pooled together. And since we raised the $1.8 million to purchase the property and build the homes, there's no mortgage. And so that money covers all operating costs. So, everything from insurance to paying for support from square one to teach them how to run their cooperative. And it also includes a small portion of that pool of funds each month gets put into a maintenance reserve. So, if somebody needs a new roof or what have you, then that money doesn't come out of their own pocket. Or, the different committees, one of them could, like House and Grounds, could use it for a garden project or different things like that. So it operates at cost, and it also allows for some flexibility in what residents are able to do in the community. And then, of course, one of the biggest things that we hope to create in our villages is that the residents themselves make the decisions on how their villages ran, on who the new members are, who new residents are. They do all of their own selections for new residents. They come up with the process that new residents are selected. Square one chooses the initial residents, and then we hand that job over to their membership committee. And Emerald Village has decided that they feel the most equitable way to choose new residents is through a lottery system. So instead of managing a wait list, they only accept applications when there's an open unit, which Ian said there is currently one open. And then people have 1 week to apply. And then essentially all of the applications go into a hat and they're numbered, and then they draw a number out of a hat and check references. So the application just closed on Tuesday, but we're getting ready to open another one probably the end of the month. Another home will be available. So let's move on to the next part of the village model here. So in addition to that, co-op and land trust marriage, we also include compact clusters. So that could be tiny houses, it could be cottages, it could be duplexes, triplexes, sixplexes even. And of course, building small structures lowers costs, it lowers the impact on the environment. And it also provides more opportunity for people to use their money for things other than housing, right? Because they're not paying for as much. And then, of course, the village model includes shared community spaces and resources. So at Emerald Village, I'm not sure if anybody here has been on a tour. Once Delta has passed through our community, I would love to take you on a tour. It's a really, really beautiful site. They have a wonderful community center. They have a huge kitchen, and so that is used for meetings, for committee meetings, for dinners, for events, for all kinds of things. And one day they hope to open it up to the broader community to rent out for different happenings. Of course, the pandemic has kind of changed that, and that's kind of on hold right now. And then sustainability is also important, of course, in the village model. So reducing energy and material use, and then high quality construction. It's one thing to build. There's a lot of different ways you can build tiny houses, and some will last a lot longer than others. And so that's also an important piece in this model. And then financing for the village model. So Emerald Village was, like I said, we raised $1.8 million. And that's amazing. That's like really incredible. And, Eugene is a super special place, and that's not easily replicable in other places or even in Eugene again. And so we look at 3 different elements. So of course, still charitable contributions and grants, public subsidies, and then also debt financing and resident equity. And so I want to talk about C Street next, which is actually the first limited equity co-op in the state, I think even in the nation, but don't quote me on that because I don't know, but I know in the state. And so essentially what that means, the way that it's different, like I said, from like Emerald Village and Cottage Village, is that the residents actually own the homes and improvements on the land. And they're able to gain limited equity. So of course they wouldn't be able to, necessarily get rich off of this homeownership opportunity, but people at 60% AMI and below will qualify for this homeownership opportunity. And so this project is actually built on a single family lot in Springfield. And so a single family lot, sorry, I was just reading the chat and I can't do 2 things at once. So this is 6 homes on a single family lot. So it's essentially a triplex or a 4plex, excuse me, plus an ADU with another ADU on top of it. So 6 units, all have private entrances, all have bathrooms and kitchens. There isn't like a community building on the site, but there's a lot of shared outdoor spaces that people can use. And so we just actually celebrated the open house last week, and now residents will be moving in next week. And so this is a really exciting development, especially because as House Bill 2001 gets implemented, we'll be able to do this much easier, and hopefully in Eugene. On single family lots, which is great for infill projects and walkable neighborhoods. And you can see it just really adds to communities as well. And I just want to go back. Let's look at this one more time. So as I mentioned, the tax credit program for affordable housing is great in a lot of ways. Affordable housing can be great. It's there oftentimes apartment complexes, and that's where tax credits go. And then it allows affordable units for 20 to 30 years. And what we're starting to see now, first starting with Cottage Village, which is where we received our first public subsidy, $500,000 from Lane County. We're also one of 2 organizations in the state that received funding directly from the Oregon legislature. So we were just awarded $2 million to develop a limited equity housing cooperative. And so we'll be doing that next with Peace Village, which I'll show you the schematics of that here just in a minute. And then also part of that $2 million, they're looking to develop a similar model in Roseburg, Oregon, which is where the gentleman who helped advocate for this money lives and wanted to create a community. And then I'll also say that from the American Rescue Plan, we received $750,000 towards Peace Village. That Peace Village will actually be almost a $9 million project. But what I wanted to say is that these public subsidies can go further because it assures housing and affordability for a much longer time period. All right, let me show you Peace Village here. Oh, here's a picture of the units at C Street, just to give you a sense of kind of their just the footprint of the property that they stand on, and then also the floor plans. So they are 1-bedroom units, but you could, if you wanted to, you could turn the living room area into another bedroom. So there is one family that does have a child, so there's a lot of different options. Here's the schematic for Peace Village. We will be able to build up to 70 units of housing there, which is really exciting. Obviously, much bigger than anything we've done before. Our biggest is Emerald Village, 22 units. With these public subsidies, we're going to be able to purchase the property, which Peace Presbyterian Church is selling us the property at a very well below market rate, and we'll be able to start pre-development this year, which is very exciting. And how are we doing on time? I just wanted to check that real quick. I know that people are going to have questions as well.
Yeah, you're doing good. You've got about 10 minutes left for presentation, and we already have one person in the queue for questions.
Okay, great. And so one of the great things about Peace Village is, so like I said, it's a property owned by Peace Presbyterian Church. And this congregation is kind of dying, and so was looking for a way to continue their mission and also support them in the work that they do. And so they reached out to Square One to develop this. And originally they were going to partition a 1.7 acre lot of their property to sell to us, where we could build 34 homes, but the partition was going to be like 80 grand. So they offered us their entire church property. And you can see the orange, the orange circles here are actually the church sanctuary and things like that. So we'll be able to use those for community gathering spaces. We won't have to build an additional dwelling on that property for people to gather. Okay, let's move on to Emerald Village. So Emerald Village is a really special place, and I look forward to being able to take you for a tour there. Ian mentioned that that this council may be interested in ways to collaborate with Emerald Village, which I'd love. And so I think one way that's a good opportunity is they have, so a housing co-op, you have one monthly general membership meeting. So all residents have to come to that meeting. And then there's weekly committee meetings. So there's 4 different committees that help run the cooperative. And then it's a kind of a section of different residents in those committees. So what I would recommend is we could get the council or, you know, who, I don't know who would want to, you know, maybe Ian, maybe your co-chair, maybe more people might have questions or want to connect. But they do have in person and by Zoom. So some of their residents come to their community center masked, and some people join by Zoom. And just to get to know residents, and then also inquire with them about what their needs and wants are as a community and ways that the council might be able to collaborate with them. So that meeting happens the second Wednesday of the month, actually today from 5 to 7. And then they also often have work parties. So, you know, I think one time they built like a compost bin, and they often have like garden parties. They have some really beautiful gardens happening there. And sometimes, you know, like cleanup parties or things like that. Volunteering with people is a great way to connect. Also, there are a lot of different organizations or even individuals that will offer like classes and trainings, workshops, and things like that on site. So residents can come. That community center is very large. So depending on what's happening with Delta, you know, inside or outside are options. And then also they love receiving meals. That's a really special thing. You know, giving love in that way is really wonderful. And so I wanted to mention that as well. And then I also wanted to mention we have originally we were going to do it in person, but of course we had to shift everything virtual because of what's happening in our community. And so I invite anyone to join who's interested. It is a free event to attend. And then you can also, for $100, you can have a Spanish themed meal delivered to your home with a dessert and wine or beer. And then I'm also in the process of finding community members who are interested in purchasing a meal to donate to Emerald Village residents. So far, we have about 10 meals confirmed by others. And I'd be happy to give a half off, a discount code, because the meal itself plus the alcohol is about $50. So I'd be happy to do that for anyone interested in supporting Emerald Village in that way as well. So Wednesday, October 6th from 7 to 8, it's going to be a really fun event. So with that, I'm going to stop the share here. And it looks like Delenia is the first in queue. Is that right, Ian?
That's right. Yeah, Delenia, feel free to jump on in.
Thank you. You said my name right the first time. Do you guys have any programs where you help neighborhood associations buy properties in their neighborhoods to get things like this started?
That's a great question. So what we do is we consult with groups, organizations, municipalities all over the country to assist them in doing the work of whether it's purchasing property or raising funds or creating a plan to build a village. So we do consultations, and we do have a few affiliate organizations on the West Coast here. So we don't necessarily have a program specifically that helps groups do that, but we do consultations. Oh, and I'll also mention that what, sorry?
No, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't catch what you said, Delinia. Can you say it again?
So it might be advantageous to look into making a program where you purchase, properties with neighborhood associations. Just something to consider.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Thank you.
And Amanda, I put in the chat a little bit of the history of the Whitaker Community Council and how we worked to create the East Blair Housing Cooperative. And actually NEDCO, which is now Dev Northwest, is a spin-off organization from the WCC, which was also founded in the late 70s, early 80s. So yeah, just another little bit of
I love it.
History. So Thea, you're next in the queue. And then we have Stephen on deck after Thea.
So Amanda, I'm very excited that you have an opening. Is this a new house or did someone get to move on? Because I was in the original committee.
Oh, okay. Yes, someone moved on. LeBeau, you might have remembered
Oh, yes,
him.
yes. So yeah, I was on the original vetting committee. So
oh, I love it.
And one of the things that when they were developing the community center, they did say they would offer it to the Whitaker Community Council to hold their meetings, their general meetings and other things way back then. So I still want to keep that on the table for us as a possibility if we need space and to work together with you. That was like, yeah, 2011, 2010. And then I don't know, as I'm going to lead into what Delinia said, but the lot on the other side of the tracks, Second and Van Buren, I spoke to the realtor today. They're about to drop the price. It would be a really nice second Emerald Village in the Whit. Just saying.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it.
You guys are doing awesome work.
Thank you so much. We have our hands full right now. So we're purchasing this 3.5 acre property, but then we also had one of our major donors purchase another 3.5 acre property and donate it to us. So we're actually working on developing both at the same time. And to Ian's point about Pastor Dan's kind of plan for that community, we're also working with the city to develop this property that was donated to us to build a similar type of we're not going to call it a camp, but it's more like a village because we'll be building structures on it, but it's specifically for the people who are camping or staying in RVs in Washington Jefferson Park or in the different places around town. So there's a lot of things happening. I wish we could take on developing another project, but who knows, maybe in the next several years.
And could you put your email? Could you send me your email? Because I have a couple other things I'd like to do later. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Amanda. It's exciting to hear how y'all are growing and also just how your model is something that's been replicated and adopted across the country. Something that I'll do in the group chat is I'll paste in there just how many exemplars there are of the village model across the United States too. And it's cool that kind of it all radiated out from the first village here in the Whitaker. Oh, Stephen, you're up next, and then Delinia, you're on deck. Stephen?
A question for Amanda. Great presentation, by the way. I had a question. Are there examples, or is there an example of a nonprofit in Lane County that was providing affordable housing that got to the end of their 25, 30-year period of property tax exemption and had received funding from federal, state, or local, and then converted to market rate housing at the end of that period. Is there one or more examples of that locally?
Well, the 20 to 30 year period isn't just a tax exemption. It's also it's also the limit on how long they need to stay affordable. So the owner of that property could then turn it into market rate. So are you asking if there's examples of that happening?
Correct. Has it happened in the past already?
Absolutely, it's happening now. And I remember just recently reading an article about a development where that was happening, but specific local, I think some of the Cornerstone community housing, they used to be metropolitan housing or something like that. And I know that they first were organized back in, I believe, in the 70s. And so I think some of their projects, but I don't quote me on that. I would have to confirm that has been happening. So I wish I had more detailed information to share about that. I might have to do some research on that, Stephen. If you want to send me a message, I can follow up with you, let you know if Cornerstone, if any of their housing developments are have turned to market rate.
I will put my email address in the chat. How about that?
Sure.
Thanks so much,
Thank you so
Stephen.
much.
Delinia, you are up next. And if anyone else has additional comments or questions for Amanda, you can let me know in the chat or just by raising your hand physically or virtually. Delinia?
I guess I was just wondering if there was some type of program where Eugene gives away property. And if you know about it.
Well, what I know of is they don't give it away, but they might lease it like for $1 a year, like they did with Opportunity Village.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question? Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, and then I have a quick comment, Amanda. Other than buying paella and finding opportunities to work together on site, are there any additional opportunities for support or for collaboration that we could provide y'all? Sharing through our social media channels or community members, fundraising opportunities we can certainly do. It sounds like y'all have a lot on your table in terms of development. But are there opportunities for like sweat equity for community members to help with kind of on the ground standing up new communities, particularly with that community, I forget the name of it, that's being designated as a safe sleep site. I watched the council work session earlier today, and I know that the council is super excited for another opportunity to work with y'all.
Yes, thank you, Ian. So that new safe sleep spot, we call it Rosa Village because it's out there on Roosevelt. It's actually pretty close to Opportunity Village. And like I said, we don't want to just have a place for tents and RVs. We want to have structures for people. So it's a little bit of a step up. And so we want to do more of like what we did with Opportunity Village, more of a community collaboration where people can come and help build. We're actually talking with several organizations to empower their youth to help us build these. And I think that this would be a great opportunity to plug the council, the Whitaker Community Council in as well. And we don't really have a super clear timeline on that yet. It depends on when the funding is available and how much funding will be available. But that's definitely something that will be coming up, and we would love sweat equity help with. They will be similar to Opportunity Village, but built a little bit better, longer lasting. The units at Opportunity Village were built with the life expectancy of about 5 years, and it's been well over that now. They're actually in pretty darn good shape, but we're doing a lot of repairs and things like that.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And I love the way that you've prioritized youth to be able to contribute to something in a meaningful way, to be able to learn skills and also see the fruits of their labor firsthand. Gail?
Yes. And I'll say that I'll go to Gail in just a second. Let me say one other thing too, that that Looking Glass approached us because they want to develop a program at their alternative high school for people to get skills in the trades. And so they're just waiting on if they're going to hear if this grant is approved to be able to fund this program where their youth can volunteer on a site and have a supervisor that specifically helps coordinate with them and with Square One. And but so that would be a program. They specifically work with Square One on this project. So that's pretty exciting as well. It looks like Gail's up next.
Yeah, and I'm just going to share something really quick. I've got a love of Whitaker history. And so I'm going to share just this little tidbit that I got from a typed newsletter from the 1970s. Looking for a summer job, Looking Glass, a youth services program in Eugene, has a new employment service for youth. It's called WEST, Whitaker Employment Services for Teens. So yeah, I just love callbacks to Whitaker history. And so yeah, to me, it's a long tradition that we've had of Cheryl was your supervisor. No way. Yeah, I love that. And so, yeah, to me, I feel like we have the community DNA to do this work together. And to me, it's just as much rediscovering our history as it is building our future. So Gail, I don't want to take away your time.
I just had a quick question, Amanda, and forgive me if this was part of your presentation and I missed it, but when you speak of the Rosie Village, is that the space on the other side of I'm sorry, I'm not entirely certain where that is. Can you help me understand where that's located, please?
I can. I'm horrible with directions. Let me see if I have the address. So it's at 2243 Roosevelt. So let me pull up a map here. Oh, wait.
That's okay. I can look it up with the address. I'm just trying to get a mental picture if it's at the Chambers end, or is it closer to the Four Corners end, or is it out of town, like at the far end? I mean, is it within the Whitaker train song area, or are we talking about way west Eugene? Just sort of a general regional, I guess, kind of idea.
It's in the train song area. Yes, it's in the train song area. I don't know if that's helpful. Sorry, I'm not more helpful with that question.
Well, Amanda, thank you so much for your time this evening and sharing with us some of your history, your model, as well as how you're growing your model and replicating it. It's super exciting work. And I look forward to being able to connect you with community members and board members who want to be able to enhance our collaborations with Emerald Village, as well as maybe foster some new collaborations with Roosevelt Village. Okay, cool. Butchering names is kind of my thing. So Rosa Village. Thank you. Rosa. Cool. Well, yeah, it's fantastic. And yeah, just can't thank you enough for your time this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much. And I look forward to collaborations as well.
Fantastic. Well, with that, I wanted to—
Have a good night.
Good night. Have a great one, Amanda. Thanks again. With that, I wanted to pass it on for another organization that's new to the space. So while the housing crisis presents us with some unique challenges, it poses a specific set of challenges to our renting community in the Whitaker. Just a few board meetings ago, we heard from one of the board members of CETA, the Springfield Eugene Tenants Association, a new nonprofit organization that for the first 2 years, our next speaker, Tim Morris, served as board president before he recently transitioned into the role of executive director. Tim has been working in Lane County for a number of years, serving the community through Lane Community College's budget committee and Lane County's budget committee. And he was a former candidate for office. He's really passionate about tenant rights and super excited to have him here tonight, particularly because we're in the depths of a housing crisis that's really impacting our community. And for any of you who've felt the instability of their own housing, who's a renter, or we have some fantastic landlords who are part of our board and part of our community who have worked really hard to make sure that folks don't have housing instability. I just know how important it is for us to be able to work together so that people are not illegally forced out of their homes, particularly at a time where we don't have enough temporary shelter or permanent supportive housing for the folks who are already living on the streets. So Tim, I wanted to pass it to you to talk about your really important work preventing eviction, but also just to talk about how the organization has grown up to this point and what your plans are for the future, because I know that you've had some exciting new hires just in the past year. So Tim, I will pass it on to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just a quick audio check. Can y'all hear me? Cool, great. I do want to first and foremost apologize for my light up microphone. I bought it recently and I didn't know it lit up. So this is a new fun toy.
No apologies needed. I think all of us need light up microphones. If anything, that should be framed as an insult. It's like, how dare you not have light up microphones?
When I turn off the lights, it looks very Darth Vader-y. It's real rough. But hi everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction, Ian, and I appreciate it. Yeah. So my name is Tim Morris. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the executive director of CETA. We're a local 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to renters' rights and interests. We incorporated back in April of 2019, which pretty right before the pandemic. And if we had on our future seeing goggles, we would have prepared a little bit better, but we've been through the ringer. We actually started because a few friends of ours, myself included as a founding member, were sitting around together and one of our friends had an issue with their landlord. Something had happened and we weren't quite sure if it was legal or if it was appropriate. And we found ourselves on our phone scrolling through landlord tenant law, not able to understand any of it. And we, had this moment of, wouldn't it be cool if there was like some resource that you could just call and ask these questions and they would have the answer. And then we said, well, let's do it. And so here we are. So we had launched, we received our first grant in August of 2020 from United Way Lane County. And then since then, we've received several other grants, including with the City of Eugene, Cities of Springfield. We've received from the State Emergency Board and other things like that. But we're primarily funded by both grants, local donations, and also we're run by volunteer power. As Ian had mentioned, we have recently had a few hires, but this time last year, we actually were entirely volunteer run, which was really not sustainable. And so just to give you a little snapshot of what our organization does, we have the only free tenant hotline that's in the area. So what that hotline is for is that any renter that has an issue or a question can call us, ask questions, share concerns, and we're able to give them whatever answer that they're looking for. We are not lawyers. We're not legal services. We don't go to court for them. We don't represent them in court. But what we we're renters ourselves, and we've done a lot of research. We've done a lot of reading. We know what these issues are, and many of us have faced the same issues. So being on the phone and connecting with someone that says, hey, I've already been there before, I've been there with you, it's really helpful and has been extremely heartwarming to have that connection. We collect data off that hotline through a series of questions that the person is more than able to answer or not answer whether or not they're interested. But we collect demographic information, why they're calling, economic information, things like that. And then we take that and we turn those into monthly reports that then we send to community members, organizations, and elected officials. So what we can tell you with those informations, for example, are that the primary folks that are seeking trouble and having issues are senior citizens and families with children. And disproportionately, people of color see more harassment than white folks. We know that, and we can prove that no-cause evictions are one of the leading causes of people being evicted. And more often than not, the no-cause evictions are filed inappropriately. They would be more appropriate as a for cause or because of a reason. And we're able to take that information, bring it to folks that are able to take that and do something with that and put in some more laws. So let me see. We can also say really confidently that 70% plus of the folks that we serve identify as either low income or severely low income. So the folks that we're serving are really folks that are in places where they don't have a whole lot of options. There aren't a lot of other resources. There's not a lot of information that's out there. And every day is a new challenge. And so I'm really proud of the work that we're able to do. I'm really proud of what we're able to bring to the community. Just to give you a snapshot of as well, pre-pandemic, before the pandemic started, we were doing something like 8 calls a week. We were able to respond to about 7 or 8 phone calls a week. We're now at about 40 calls per week. We were able to, or we had entirely volunteer run. We now have 3 staffs. We're bringing on 4. Our 4th, which I'm really, really excited about, but it's kind of secret, so don't tell anyone. We have grown to be a trusted member, both in our local and our state community. We're often brought into the room when legislators are making decisions or having conversations, and they ask us, what do you see on the ground floor? And so we're able to provide that kind of perspective where it really wasn't represented in the past or represented well. And so, as I'm sure you know, renting during quarantine and during the emergency period has changed really dramatically and has really highlighted a lot of the inequities that renters are seeing. And so you're now, you probably have already seen or are now becoming more aware of more renter protections that are coming out, such as Senate Bill 278 and 282, and other maybe local ordinances that are coming up as well, and conversations that are happening. And the main reason is because during quarantine, we know that renters are employed at more public facing jobs. So retail, food service, things like that. And when the pandemic hit and everything shut down, those jobs were lost and renters found themselves without income. And we can see a lot of other more interesting events happening when it comes to landlord-tenant relationships. And we're able to really highlight those and really try to figure out, is this how we really want our law to be moving forward? And is this how we want things to be going on? And so we've connected with landlords, we've connected with other local community organizations, and we're trying to figure out the best route for protecting tenants. And so another thing that we have just launched, it's our new program that just has become public. It's called our Court Support Program. And essentially what this is that we obtain a list of any tenant that has received an eviction and that ever has a court first appearance. And what we do is we go to that tenant's house and say, hey, do you know about your first appearance? Do you know you can show up to court and this is what it looks like? It's pretty easy, pretty simple. We try to take out all the scary news in the end because not a lot of people go to court. And so it's very overwhelming to have to attend a court appointment. And then we also tell them about the new laws that have changed, such as Senate Bill 282, which is the eviction safe harbor bill, where essentially if you've applied for rent assistance, you have a 60-day eviction pause in your tenancy. And that way it gives time for rent assistance to be able to be processed and come through. So we talk about that with folks at their door. And then we also even can sign them up right then and there. So that way they can then take that and go to their landlord and say, hey, look, I've applied for rent assistance. That's a really cool new program that we've just started. We've just started publicizing it. And it's obviously taken off because going to folks' doors is meeting people where they're at is exactly what we need to do during this really unprecedented time. Our volunteers and our staff are completely safe. We keep 6 feet distance. We don't go into anyone's houses. We have masks. We have hand sanitizers. We try not to cough on anyone. And so we're very careful about that. But the work that we're doing, we've knocked now about 80 doors or so. And I can tell you 5 or 6 people, and I know that that seems like a small number, but 5 or 6 people have contacted us back saying, hey, I've been able to keep my housing because of your door knock. And so it's a really powerful program that we have. And so finally, we have an education program. What we do is we run small trainings and talk about things like Senate Bill 282, like Senate Bill 278, like Senate Bill 608 or House Bill 2001, things like that, the changes that are happening here locally. So that way we're able to really talk about what a renter needs to know in order to maintain their tenancy and in order to be equipped to manage any weirdness that might come, or to just know what their rights and responsibilities are. And so I feel like I've pontificated enough. So I think I'm gonna pause there and sort of see if we can open it up for questions.
Thanks so much, Tim. Yeah, we've got 2 folks first. Delinia, you're up first, and then Angie, you're on deck. Delinia?
Hello, Tim. Thank you for that information. Is it possible to, I mean, like, do you guys collect data as far as where they are in their addresses, and where can that data be viewed? So if it's like with our neighborhood association, you know, within our neighborhood.
So yes, we do collect information such as folks' addresses and what their zip codes are. And really it is purely voluntary and optional. We don't restrict any information if someone is not interested in giving us, you know, their age or, you know, whatever. And so, but we do collect that information. We don't post exactly where specific neighborhoods or specific areas folks are. The most detailed that we do get on our end is we identify whether they're Eugene or Springfield. We are cautious with the data that we have. A lot of us that's on the board of directors, I should mention the vast majority of our board of directors are renters themselves. But many of our board of directors have also worked in either medical field or sets of substance abuse and recovery like myself. And so we're very attuned to HIPAA law, you know, and being very, very careful about data and information. So we have not publicized really where some of these calls are coming from, but what I can tell you is that, and Ian has talked about this before, but 80% of the Whitaker are renters themselves. So you can probably derive that many of our calls do come from the Whitaker neighborhood.
Well, I guess my question is not really HIPAA or even getting into people's personal information, but just the addresses themselves, or like letting neighborhoods know, hey, look, this percentage of your neighborhood is, I mean, I would say like just tweaking the data down a little bit and letting them know to help them realize what's going on in their own neighborhoods.
I hear you. I think one of the challenges that we have had, and I do want to, I'll bring that back to my board as a suggestion of bringing it closer to the neighborhoods that we're seeing. But we want to make it comfortable for a tenant to be able to talk about what's going on and maybe even share, you know, what they're seeing and what their landlord might have done. And then if we kind of turn around and use specific addresses, it could put more risk to the tenant than we need to. And so being that specific might be more harmful than helpful, but I do like the idea of bringing it to
maybe a
neighborhood
cluster, like a cluster, like if you see certain neighborhoods having that, you let them know, you know, like, hey, you guys got a cluster here.
I'll take a note of that. That's a good idea. I appreciate that, Delinia. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Delaney. I think it's an interesting idea to disaggregate that data so it's not address specific, but as Gail suggested, maybe by zip code. It might be another layer of work to do it with, you know, the boundaries as laid out by cities like Eugene or Springfield, but certainly by zip code. You know, you might miss this, Tim, but zip code might be too big. In Claire's opinion, I think that's true, because you get it too much in a certain area. But certainly that's what we do for our vaccine work. Yeah, census tracts, census blocks, those are great ideas, because there's layers of data onto that too. Might be an awesome project for a 3 p.m. a planning public policy management graduate student at the University of Oregon in the GIS program, just noodling around, maybe get some help there. So yeah, I think these are some great ideas. I'm excited to hear more. Angie, you're next in the queue, and then Jen, you're on deck.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for coming again. It's very nice to see you again. I was wondering, do you advise, I mean, do you have any kind of, I don't even know how to say this. What is fair market for, you know, rent? And then is your group working with any kind of tenants or landlord associations to work on that? Because I looked the other day and I think Oregon was like top 10 for rent prices, which is insane. It might be higher than that, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. Buckle up, everyone. Get ready to nerd out with some data with me. All right, here we go. So we are looking at it. We're finding a balance between reporting on information as an informational resource and then taking action on that resource, and trying to find that appropriate balance. Because you know, I might have missed it at the top, but one of the misconceptions about us is that we're anti-landlord, and that's not true. As our organization, we're pro-tenant, not anti-anything. And so trying to be cautious of knowing what information we're bringing in while also being as close to the truth as possible and not jumping to conclusions. So that's our challenge as a tenant organization. But we are keeping track of what rental prices are, and it's rough. I'm laughing, but it's real rough. We here in Eugene have a rental vacancy rate of about 2%. And your average city has a rental vacancy rate of somewhere between 5 and 8%. And for y'all's information, in case you're not as deep of a data nerd as me, a rental vacancy rate just means at one specific moment in time, it's a snapshot of how many available residential units are available, or how many are rentable, how many are empty. So what that means is that if there's a vacancy rate that's like 10 or 12%, there could be a whole lot of reasons. They could have just built a whole swath of units, but haven't filled them quite yet. There could have been, we saw when the first stimulus check come out in specific states like Arkansas, Mississippi, Missouri, like some of the more poorer neighborhoods that people want to leave, we saw rental vacancy rates expand because people were able to get out. So that's kind of what's on the table. But here in Eugene, it's 2%. That low number only has one reason, and that's because there's not enough housing available. There's just no way around it. There's no other reason. There's no other conclusion to get to that number. We need more housing. We are working with the city of Eugene and the city of Springfield to talk about areas of improvement of where we could expand our housing opportunities. I myself sat on the House Bill 2001 and 2003 Rulemaking Advisory Committee, and I've worked with our city councilors and city staff on, you know, what was going on in the back end, and whether or not they take that advice is up to them. But we're doing what we can to really push the very true fact that we don't have enough housing. And we need more of everything. We've had a lot of conversations, like our ADU ordinances are burdensome and make it difficult to purchase or build accessory dwelling units. We've had conversations such as single unit dwelling units on huge corner lots that take up all this room. Might not be the most appropriate for a city that has 200 plus or 2,000 plus unhoused individuals that they have counted, things like that. So I'm trying to remember your original question because I've dived down into the rabbit hole of data.
Just the establishment of market rates. You did answer it in a way, but it's more the other end of it, which is build more housing, which will increase the amount of available units, which will decrease the rent. So is that your approach?
Right. So, I mean, there's things that we can do. There's things that are somewhat out of our hands. And there's things like raising the minimum wage, lowering healthcare costs, removing student debt. These are massive economic barriers that a lot of people face in their lives that most likely are impeding renting. But there's also things that we could do on a local level, like more housing, and being very intentional when we say affordable housing, because affordable housing means nothing. Affordable for you is very different than affordable for me. So we say low income housing so that there's a federal number that's attached to that, the federal poverty limit. So being very intentional about how we're approaching subjects, using the tools that we have appropriately, like the MUPD or engaging with developers more appropriately. There's a whole swath of different things that we can do locally that we are advising as best as we can or advocating for if we're not being listened to. And so, it's a big question that I hope I got to something of an answer for you, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. We've got Jen up next, and then Delinia, you're after Jen, and then Thea, I will put you on deck after Delinia. Jen?
Okay, thank you, Tim. You answered a lot of the things that were running through my head. And I also want to say thank you for following your instincts and developing this CERTA, which, by the way, what does it stand for?
Oh, CETA, it's the Springfield Eugene Tenant Association.
Say that again?
Springfield Eugene Tenant Association.
Tenant Association.
And what I can do as well, Jennifer, and for everyone else here as well, is I can post in the chat a link to our website.
Thank you.
And that way you can look us up on your own.
Thank you. And so yes, thank you again for following your instincts. But how many employees do you have, or would you say work for CETA?
Could you repeat your question? I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear.
How many employees? How many of you work on this?
Yeah, so we have currently 3 employees, 2 are full-time, 1 is part-time, and we are looking to hire our 4th employee who may be full-time as well.
And you said you had a board? And
we do. We have a board of 9 board of directors, yes.
I see. Okay, thank you for that. Also, is there by chance a particular block or two that seems to have a high turnover because maybe they have a lot of apartments on that particular block, or anything noticeable like that?
It's a hard question that I would have to get back to you on, and I'd have to look into our information a little bit more deeply. As I'm sure you can imagine, apartment complexes like 13th and Olive have a higher eviction and turnover rate. But is that because that there are more evictions happening there, or they just have more units? You know, those kind of questions. So I wouldn't quite be able to answer you directly right now, but we have noticed that during this time, especially because there have been a significant number of changes to the law of evictions and of what it's like to rent and what protections are available to renters, it's not necessarily a pattern of specific units or specific people that are evicting highly. It's folks that may not have access to the same information that are inappropriately filing evictions. And so for example, we're seeing smaller landlords file for evictions, like your average mom and pop landlord, I should say, that are filing for an eviction that is really inappropriate. As I said before, we're not a legal resource, but I would say of dubious legality. And so, we flag those. We let the landlord know, like, hey, this is a little weird. Definitely recommend looking back into this and seeing, what next steps are available for you. But yeah, so I think that without going further into speculative information. I think it's really more about what resources are available, and yeah, I think I'll land there.
Okay, and I noticed out of my block on North Polk Street off of Railroad, we have 5 some very large apartment complexes. And I don't see a turnover very often or notice it on this block. And I find that interesting, where other places you have a lot of, I guess they're apartments. Oh, which is another question. Are there more rentals that are apartments or houses? Do you know?
At one point in my life, I did know the answer to that question. I no longer do. I can get back to you on that one. I believe that there are more apartment complexes than there are single unit dwellings that are for rent. A closer number to get to you is in terms of housing, housing stock, or excuse me, housing, what housing you have. 51% of the city of Eugene rents. And so the majority of folks that live in the city of Eugene are renters, not homeowners. And so that can kind of give you a clue as to where we're at in terms of complexes versus single units. But yeah.
All right, thank you for that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Great. We've got Delinia up next, and then Thea, you're on deck. Delinia?
Hi, Tim. So do you have any programs that you work with the good landlords where, like, if they're having problems with tenants, or like they have questions where they can't answer, like turning it around to help them do it, you know, what they need to do, or maybe even help mediate some situation where you can come to a mutual agreement with the landlord, or like give them a gold star. Thea comes to mind, by the way.
I like that, a gold star on that. So we don't do mediation, and I'm being very clear about that because there are some legal implications if you are a mediator. And so I want to be super clear that we're not mediating, or that we're not lawyers. Again, legal implications on that. We do collaborate with individual landlords. And we've communicated with folks that contact us that, you know, might not know what resources are in the neighborhood, whether they are tenants or landlords. Again, we are pro tenants, and we do set the boundaries of if, and we had a phone call, for example, we had a phone call the other day of a landlord that was just heart set on evicting their tenant. They wanted to get rid of them. And we made it very clear that we are not in the business of evicting tenants during a pandemic and economic crisis and housing crisis. And, you know, and so we do set boundaries when necessary, but we do also provide information on an individual basis. In terms of on a larger scale, there are resources for landlords such as the Toronto Owners Association, I think Northwest, oh goodness, multifamily Northwest, things like that, that are available for landlords. And we've, whether
Well,
intentional.
it's more like a gold star for the ones that work with you guys, and like, hey, here's a list of people that are good to work with, or, you know, I don't know, something that would help both sides of the, not mediating, but more along the lines of, you know, here are some people who are pretty good at what they do too.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah, we don't really publicize information, like I said before, about that. If we're hearing that there are good landlords, we thank them individually. But similar to tenant addresses, you know, we try not to advertise landlords so much. And one of the main reasons is because there is that other side of the flip coin of, do we then publicize the bad landlords, or the ones we hear a lot about? And that's a real big rabbit hole that I don't think we're ready or willing to go down yet. So that's kind of where we're at, is we don't necessarily advertise the really, really good ones, but we do thank them individually.
Thank you, Tim.
Of course.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Delinia. We've got Thea up next, and then Claire and Meg, I put you in the queue because you had questions in the chat, and I'm happy to read your questions or you can read them yourself. And then after that, it's me. Thea?
So Tim, I am a landlord. I think I provide affordable housing, so I'm kind of curious. I have a couple questions. One is, what do you consider affordable housing in Eugene? Because I keep asking that question, and I'm told my rents are way too low. So just so you know. But then I have a second question because we had someone come, I think it was Ryan that came and spoke, and I want to ask you a couple questions about something
Yeah,
he said.
absolutely. So when it again, the term affordable housing has been really used on both local, national, statewide scale, and it sort of changes based on the person that's talking about it. So when I talk about affordable housing, I personally try to avoid that term as much as I can. I talk about low income housing.
Okay, so what do you consider low income?
So there's the federal poverty limit that is out there. So it's, for example, my brain is mush today, so I apologize. But if you are a tenant and you are severely low, or excuse me, severely rent burdened, what that means is that you're paying 50% plus of your income just on rent alone. What we can see is that here in Eugene, 35% of the renters total of the city of Eugene are considered severely low income. So that means they're paying that, 35% of all the renters in our city, which again is the majority of our city, are paying most or the majority of their income just on rent. And so we can then take the information of what is the average salary here in the city of Eugene and then be able to pare it down right there. I don't have that information directly in front of me, but it is a pretty scary scenario for a lot of renters. Anecdotally and professionally, we hear stories of folks that engage in relationships and even get married, maybe because of love, but more out of economic reasons. And so it's a real scary time. But I do want to comment that the problem of having rents too low, I don't think is a problem at all. That sounds like a real awesome problem to have.
So here's my question. Do you work with ROA to educate landlords? Because I work with my tenants to educate them. And so do you work with them? Because a lot of the small mom and pop landlords use ROA or don't know about ROA, which for everyone else is Rental Organization Association of Oregon, and it's for small landlords and large. So do you work with them at all?
For full transparency, we have attempted in the past to connect with them and work with them. It seems that they're not interested. And so we've decided to continue doing what we're doing.
If you want to help get connections, I'll help you get connected.
I appreciate
that. Okay, because it needs to be worked together. It's not going to get solved if we don't work together. And then the other part is that I know that you're looking at proposing to the city if a tenant lives beyond a year, similar to Portland's laws, they live beyond a year, then the landlord has to pay moving costs if they get evicted or if there's a no cause notice to move. How are you going to handle the constant turnover? Because right now, our big property management companies pretty much only let tenants stay 1 year. And so it creates that rent increase because every time they move out, then they can raise the rents on the next tenant. So how are you going to prevent that? Because for the mom and pops, they can't afford to pay that when they move out, especially if they're providing low rent. So have you thought that through? And I'd love to talk to you sometime about it, not in this forum necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tia, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick my, oh no, I was going to say, I'm going to stick my email in the chat here as well. And so if you or anyone else is interested in contacting me privately to talk more, I'm available. I'm saying ooh, because for whatever reason, there's a whole bunch of tildes in my email now all of a sudden. So I'm managing that. But so for full transparency, the displacement prevention assistance is not under the Springfield Eugene Tenant Association. We are one organization that's signed it. It's a coalition of folks that I believe have now 14 separate organizations that have signed on. And so, yeah, I believe Ryan Moore had come here to talk to y'all about it. I think the big question, I think, again, I do want to highlight that a lot of renters here in the city of Eugene are severely rent burdened. So we're seeing 35% of all renters, which again, the majority of city are renters, are paying more than 50% of their income on just rent and rent alone, not groceries, not utilities, not cars and shoes, just rent. And so when it comes to moving into a unit, a tenant invests in that. A tenant will invest a security deposit, first and last month's rent, whatever else fees come in, a moving truck, maybe movers, maybe if they are in a wheelchair, reasonable accommodation, moving their ramp to the front door, things like that. And then within a year to be evicted is a really high cost to put on a tenant who has just invested this amount of money into a unit, into making a home. It's a really difficult situation that has and is continuing to add to our homeless population, that people just run out of money. We have seen in, for example, the city of Cottage Grove has a rental vacancy rate, if you remember me talking about that before. They have a rental vacancy rate of less than 1%. What happens there is that there was an apartment complex really recently of 14 units that were evicted all at once. And because there are no units available, every single one of those tenants were looking into buying tents, sleeping in the car, trying to find somewhere else to go, and there is nothing for them. So when it comes to evicting a tenant, and when it comes to moving someone out, it should be a financial business decision that happens on the landlord side, that there should be a reason that is attached to it. And that the burden of that moving should not fall to the tenant through no fault of their own.
No, what I'm concerned is that if it were to come into play, more people are going to do what the property management companies are, which is they're not continuing the lease. So a tenant is having to move every year, which is really unstable for tenants.
Not continuing the lease, there are laws that do protect around that. And for example, if you have I'm sure you are aware of this, but if you have a year lease that you have not intentionally or accidentally renewed, it automatically goes to a month to month. We see tenants that have a week to week that go month to month. And so there are protections for folks that maybe don't have a renewal process. But this is a pretty weedy conversation that I'd love to have.
Yeah, I would like to have with you later. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Thea. We've got about 10 minutes left. We have Claire, Meg, and then myself. Claire, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Ian. And thanks, Tim, for coming tonight. And I'll be really brief, just because folks have said a lot of what I was going to say. But my initial question that I posted in the chat was whether there is a dialogue ongoing between CETA and landlords. And that was, kind of touched on and answered. But I also work in the nonprofit world, and I've been working in the nonprofit world for like 3 years plus now. And the biggest thing that I've learned is it is beneficial to break down silos in nonprofit world, silos being tenants and landlords in this specific situation. I understand, the importance of being I forget the phrasing you used. It was like a landlord or a tenant benefiting organization, or I forget what the phrasing was, but there needs to be both sides of the pie there in that conversation in order for the silos to be broken down, in order for the conversation to be full. Another thing that came to mind actually after Delenia's, I think it was Delenia's comment, was, along the kind of like the gold star lines, not quite calling out bad landlords and gold starring good landlords, but it reminded me of this thing in town called the bike friendly business accreditation, which is literally just kind of like a sticker on a business. It's not saying, it's not like advertising the business. It's not saying like, oh, you should go here. It's saying they're doing something right in the name of, in that case, bike friendliness and safe transportation. Transportation is my other side of my life. But I think that as a renter myself, if I saw like some kind of sticker, whether virtual or whatever, on the application, I think it would change things, and it would kind of maybe change the climate around what it is to be a good landlord in a time when it's really, really hard to do that increasingly.
Sure, I hear you. And the phrasing that I used was we're pro tenant, not anti anyone. And I do want to really be clear about that. That I know I've talked a lot about what steps that landlords have done and steps that tenants have done. And to just give you a snapshot of my personal background, I worked in property management for about 2 years as a maintenance coordinator and rental application processor. And so, I have worked in the property management landlord side of things. And so, I completely agree that breaking down silos and breaking down those barriers to communicate and meet together is important. It's important for folks to meet in the middle. So our arm is extended, and we'll see where it goes. But, I think that one of the comments that I really want to make here is that when it comes to landlord-tenant conversations, there have not been a whole lot of tenant advocates. There are a few scattered around. You can see, for example, Portland had Chloe Daly, who is no longer a city councilor, but was a very strong tenant advocate. Shamia Fagan in the legislature was a really strong tenant advocate who has now moved on to Secretary of State. But I'm able to pinpoint a few because there are only a few. Whereas when you look at the Oregon Senate, the vast majority of Oregon senators are landlords. So when it comes to conversations of tenants' rights, it is pretty heavily skewed in that conversation. So we exist as an organization to provide a space where any and all renters can come and share their concern without any issue of us spreading that information around, us using that information against them. We're a safe place for folks to come and just vent and look for information. So that's really the kind of atmosphere and culture that we're trying to cultivate, is that we're here to protect renters, and that's what we're here for.
Thanks so much, Claire. We've got time for two more. Meg, I wanted to pass it to you to ask your question, if you like, that you put in the chat, or I can read it for you, whatever you'd like.
Well, I'm here, and I think that I'm concerned about affordable housing, whatever that definition is. There's not apparently anybody willing to say what a reasonable amount of rent is as some medium figure, whether it's $800 a month or $1,200 a month, whether there's subsidies available. But I think that there's a phenomenon happening where landlords are raising the rent to some imaginary maximum that keeps rising. And if somebody was willing to say, this is a reasonable amount of rent, that perhaps it would monitor landlords in establishing what their rent amount is. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And yeah, I do apologize about not having direct numbers. It takes a significant amount of math. And even though Ian had mentioned my budgeting credentials at the beginning, math is really not my strong suit. So I'm not able right now at this moment, but I'm sure if Ian's okay with it, once I get that number correctly, if he could share it with all of you, that way I can provide a more closer to the truth answer. But I think that you hit some nail on the head, that there is an imaginary increase of rent of going up a specific amount without really any rhyme or reason. And to really put in a reason, or when I talk about rental vacancy rate, it's not just a percent, it's not just a number, but that low percent means that when a unit does become vacant, and an application process is opened, landlords will receive something like 20 or 25 applicants. And so the negative consequence of raising the rent so high is really not there if they can still fill that unit, no problem. So the market balance is a little skewed because there's just not enough housing available. So I think you really made a good point about what the lack of housing really does and how it really affects tenant households.
Thanks so much, Meg. So we've got one more question, and it's actually not from me. It's from our board member, Anand, who's not able to be here tonight. But Anand's question is about some incentives that you think would work to be able to increase the amount of low-income housing that's built. So Anand's question is specifically on low-income housing, and it's with respect to development costs. He's wondering if you've seen other developments around the state leverage parties outside of government to pay development fees to be able to lower the cost rather of low-income housing. Could be utility companies, could be construction companies, could be through different tax instruments, because he feels that those fees have kept other neighborhoods from putting up low-income developments and are often cited as a reason for not being able to reach a break-even point or achieve profitability with low-income housing.
Yeah, it's we're jumping into a weedy question once again. So in an effort to not bore y'all, I'm going to try to be brief. Yeah, so there are definitely subsidies, whether utilities, whether development costs, whether directly working with a timber company rather than just buying off market. There are a lot of different avenues in which developers can engage with. I don't have any extremely specific examples. What I will talk about is Joe Burney, the Lane County Commissioner, has advocated for project labor agreements, which essentially say that a construction project has to be agreed upon before it begins. So the employer has to pay a fair wage. The employer has to provide healthcare to the employees. There could be stipulations of you hire locally rather than outsourcing out of the state, things along those lines. And those project labor agreements have been seen as effective and supportive of working families, especially local working families. And I recognize that I'm saying this while being recorded in a City of Eugene Neighborhood Association meeting, but the City of Eugene Housing Code is not fantastic. Again, I served on the House Bill 2001 and 2003 Rulemaking Advisory Committee. We broke down several different cities and how the housing codes were existing and operating, and it has been extremely challenging to look at our zoning code, which quite frankly looks like someone took some Skittles and threw it at a map and said, it looks great. And so it's been very difficult to build here in the City of Eugene. And there are multiple reasons. As I'm sure you know, there's lumber prices is skyrocketed and hasn't dropped since the pandemic has begun. There's a whole litany of reasons why developers aren't developing, but I think that we can take a moment to look at our own housing code, our own zoning laws, and really try to identify where some hurdles are that we would be okay with removing. And the final thought on that too is that I on that committee sat, and I'm forgetting his last name, and I'm very regretful of that, but in the City of Springfield, Mark Rust with the City of Springfield. And just the difference of the City of Eugene versus the City of Springfield. Here in Eugene, our city council voted completely against, hated House Bill 2001, the change in the zoning law, and even went up to testify for it, and still passed, still went forward. And it has been very difficult to put in that implementation of any of the zoning laws that are there. Mark Rust, throughout the rulemaking advisory process, actually took the ideas that were happening right then and there, brought it to Springfield, and they were implementing them immediately. And so we can see now the implementation of House Bill 2001 in Springfield has been extremely smooth. The citizens are all informed and everyone's happy with what's been done. Here in Eugene, it's been significantly more challenging. There's been a lot more upset and unrest. And so I think it also has something to do with approach of how we accept change. I suppose is what I'm trying to say. So I'll sort of stop there before I get a phone call from Sarah Maderi saying, "What are you doing?" But
No, it's going to be the New York Times. They often watch our WCC meetings, so they're going to scoop it. And what a great way to put a capstone on this, because you're tying House Bill 2001 using R1 zoned parcels of land for duplexes, triplexes, and quads. And in fact, the C Street Co-op that Amanda described in Springfield is an exemplar of what Tim just talked about. How not just city government, but an organization leveraged the change in housing code to be able to create true low-income housing. So yeah, what a great coda to put on your presentation. And thanks so much, Tim. It was a real pleasure to have you tonight. Thank you so for being so generous with your time and your email. Yeah, we have some super passionate board members who are both tenants, landlords. We have some very passionate dogs too. I don't know if Whitney's going to be reaching out to you. But yeah, we're just really lucky to have you on all of our teams, and just wanted to say thanks so much for joining us. And last is, if there's any opportunities to collaborate, sweat equity, or ways that we can contribute financially, or just be able to really advocate for y'all through our newsletter, our networks, our social media channels, please let us know. Because you're doing really tremendous work, and it's certainly a resource for the community, particularly those of us who are renters, and the community members who are renters and who are low income or housing insecure.
of course, thank you so much for having me and spending what is it, Wednesday, Thursday? What day is it? An evening.
Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah.
Wednesday, Thursday, somewhere in the middle. Wednesday, Thursday in the middle of the night. Thank you so much for having me and diving real deep into the weedy code. I don't often have a chance to do that, so I appreciate that immensely. So, but thank you all so much for having me, and my email's there. Feel free to reach out to me if there's any questions, concerns, or we're here, we're working. So I appreciate y'all as well, and all of your hard work as well.
Cheers. Thanks so much, Tim. We're just a minute over time, but I wanted to quickly go into a review of what next week's board meeting is going to look like. All of our board meetings are open to a public. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization as designated by the IRS, much in the same way that CETA is, or Square One Villages before them. So we have a couple of exciting things on our agenda. We're going to be voting. Well, there's going to be a motion brought for discussion and vote on how to be able to budget funds for our COVID-19 grants. There's going to be a presentation on one of our standing committees, the Whitaker Community Art Team. Some members of that are going to come to the board and present on the work that's been done to make art more equitable and more vibrant in the Whitaker, specifically around the work that we're doing now to use art as a way to increase vaccine confidence. There's going to be a presentation by Claire, Andrew, and Dan for the Transportation Committee, and an opportunity for them to talk about their vision for the Transportation Committee. And then Jen, who's leading our work to revise our charter, is going to be having an opportunity to be able to talk about her work that she's been doing to revise our charter too. So our board meetings will always have opportunities for the public to comment as well. So please feel free to join us at the same time, 7 p.m. next Wednesday. Oh, and we've got another cat from Claire. Sweet. I don't know if we can have a higher endpoint at that, but we're going to give Jen the last word. Jen?
Is there going to be anything on the agenda about the grant writer?
So I'm going to respond via email. I've got some thoughts about that, but certainly we can use the time on the COVID-19 grants budgeting to be able to bring that into the conversation too.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Cheers, everyone. Thanks for joining. And I'll upload this to our YouTube channel and then put that on the Open Neighbors group in just a bit. Have a great night. See you next week.
Okay, thank you.